All right, welcome to There is a Method to the Madness. I am Rob Maxwell and I am an exercise physiologist. In the Method to the Madness, I explore with you why things may or may not work in the realm of health and fitness. Is there a method behind it, or is it simply madness? Today's episode, I'm going to talk about the long duration run or bike or whatever, what is called LSD, long, slow distance. Not the drug people, grow up, all right? All right, but before I jump into that, I got to pay the bills. So let me thank our very first and greatest sponsors, Jonathan and Lynn Gilden at the Gilden Group at Realty Pros. They currently have over 275 star reviews on Zillow and over 100 million in sales between the two. You're not successful unless you're good. I think we all know that, right? They can be reached at 386-451-2412 or at thegildengroup.com. All right, so as you know in the Method to the Madness, I like to get to the nitty-gritty and find out what works. Like, is there a method behind this, or is this just crap? Is this just like madness and we haven't used our part of the brain that does critical thinking to think about it? And this week I've had some fun episodes. I did what kind of rep range is best, and is there such thing as a perfect rep range? I did what kind of modes are best in strength training. Is there really a best? I looked at amino acid supplementation, and I went on a little rant about people taking advantage of the insurance companies. But hey, you got to tune in and have some fun sometimes. So today I'm going to tackle the old LSD run. Now this applies to everybody, not just your endurance athletes or your nutty neighbor that runs 5Ks on the weekend and you call her the nutty neighbor and she refers to herself as a 5K specialist, or even your nuttier neighbors that are they call themselves triathletes and you call them, why in the hell are you up at 4:30 in the morning packing this stupid looking Suburban with all their gear and they're not back for a few hours, neighbors? So it's not just for them, it's for everybody. There's been this long debate, it's a pretty one-sided debate. Most people are under the belief that going really long, at least one day per week in their training, is beneficial. Is there a method behind that? Or is that just madness? Well, it may not be madness at all if you really like it, right? But then that depends on the motive, and that's hard to figure out too. So let's look at all of that. So to give you a little bit of a backstory, the American College of Sports Medicine, when it comes to cardio, originally had their position stand stating that people need at least 5 days of cardio between 20 and 60 minutes each day. That was the original position stand. So they were pretty specific in the sense that they wanted at least 5 days. They went on to say that 7 days was more preferable if you're trying to lose weight. And they pretty much determined that the threshold for cardio in a day, could be broken up, but in a day was at least 20 minutes. That's the threshold. And then they stated can be up to 60 minutes. They didn't say go beyond 60 minutes, but what they said was you're going to have a point of diminishing returns after 60 minutes. So wasn't necessarily necessary. That was a position stand for a long time. They also gave the intensity, because if you remember from previous podcasts, an exercise prescription is frequency, how many days per week, intensity, how hard, time, how long, so FIT, and then the other one is type. So they also gave the intensity and said originally between 60 and 90% of your maximum heart rate for most people, and naturally admitting that somebody could go higher than 90% if they're racing or they're training for performance or whatever. Now in the last few years they've changed it just a little bit. They've come up with more of a minutes per week position stand where they say the minimum amount of minutes per week of cardiorespiratory exercise should be 150 minutes of moderate intensity per week, and 300 minutes being more preferable, and 450 minutes being like if you're really training for something. So that's slightly different, although if you did the math, you'd see it kind of all comes out to be about the same thing. They also changed the position stance a little bit to where they're not as concerned with heart rate, because they know that can be pretty variable and hard for people to measure, and it kind of gives people reason sometimes to pull the old paralysis of analysis thing and then not do it, when in reality movement is great. So they came up with more of a moderate and vigorous intensity, and I won't bore you with all the details, but essentially if you were going to go more at a vigorous rate, which would be more of a jog or higher, then you could get away with less minutes per week, which is true, by the way. And if you went at a more moderate pace, which is more of a brisk walk, just using walking and running as the examples, you would have to cover more minutes. So there's no question that if you're putting in a good effort every week like that, you're going to get more aerobically fit. Now, where this long day comes in, typically comes in for people who are training for a particular endurance event. It could be 5K racing, which is 3.1 miles, 10K racing, which is double that, half marathon, marathon. It could be triathlons of different distances, what they call sprint, which in the previous podcast I talked about is kind of silly because it's not really a sprint, it's a very aerobic activity. But that's shorter and can be done around the hour to 75 to 90 minute range. There's longer ones that essentially double that. And then there's the Ironman, which is like a super long day, like 8 to 9 hours for the absolute elite, and up to 17 hours for cutoff time. So that's really long. And then it goes even beyond that. And then there are people, and I actually train one that does this, that does the ultra marathons. And typically they're considered like 50 miles and up of running or ambling, whatever. So run, walk, whatever gets you through it. So there's really long events out there for endurance. And everybody has different reasons as to why they do these things. I like to participate in 5Ks for running. I've recently done 10Ks and years ago did some marathons and half marathons, and that's all good. But as far as running goes, I tend to prefer like the 5K distance, very manageable. I can stay focused, relatively focused for me for that amount of time. I also really enjoy the sprint triathlons because same thing, I can stay very, very focused, and I feel like I can do everything I need to do. And, the day isn't that long if I go race or something. And it keeps me in shape. It's just, hey, that's what it's all about. It gives me a different modes of cardio to work on and try to improve myself on, swimming, biking, and running. And so that enables me to stay fit because really that's what it's all about, right? Not anybody I know personally at this stage of my life is getting paid to do these things. Those are called professionals. So I think some people think they're professionals, but hey, that's for a whole nother podcast and you probably wouldn't be overly interested. So let's keep it to fitness. So in those realms, what's always been pretty typical, and please listen to this and state that I'm not telling you not to do it. I'm just trying to give you the method to the madness, and everybody's a little bit different. But with these types of training, especially with some of the longer runs, longer races, longer events, people typically put in like double or triple of the amount duration that they're going to race. So for example, a person, and again, I have to qualify this with there's different like distances people do. I'm just going to give you some ranges. Let's take a 5K runner that is racing cross country. So the typical wisdom has been a long run, and these 5K runners, which is 3.1 miles, may run up to 10 miles on their long run. And in some institutions, and when I say institutions, I mean like high schools with particular coaches that lean this way, or colleges, they might go even further. So these 5K runners might be putting in 10 to 12 miles for a long day on a Saturday or a Sunday, along with their typical training they do, which oftentimes for them, being young and having time and all that, is running every day with maybe one day off and then a long run. So that's like 3 to 4 times longer than their event. So the wisdom is, and I'm just using this as an example, you could take Ironman. Well, you know what? I'll finish with that, talk about Ironman, because what's funny is their event is very long, and thank God the people do not go as long as the race is in training. So, and that's one of the clues there as to why maybe you don't need to actually do it then for the others. But anyway, to the shorter races, under the half marathon. So the thought is, if you're going that much longer, you're going to get that much more fitness. Now, here is the method, and I'm going to break it to you from a fitness perspective. That's madness. It's simply not true. I gave you a clue when I gave you the American College of Sports Medicine's answer as far as what happens if you go beyond the hour. You get what is called a point of diminishing returns. So what that means is, up to an hour in training, thereabouts, everybody's a little bit different, but up to an hour, you're getting the benefits you need as far as an increase in your VO2 max and an increase in your lactate threshold. Do you get more benefit going beyond the hour? Here's what they found. You get a 5% benefit, possibly, in those areas I just stated, if you double your distance to 2 hours. So you get 100% improvement up to that hour, potentially on a great day if everything's clicking. But then only 5% more if you double that duration. Is that really worth it? That's possible. And you could also get tendons broken down to the point where they're going to tear or become injured, shin splints, stress fractures, and just general overtraining, especially like if you live here where I do in Florida, where it's always so freaking hot, you have to then say, is this added stress worth 5%? And that's a possible 5%. So what exercise scientists have really known, and it's not very popular though, because distance runners really like to go long, and again, I'll get there. But it doesn't add to the performances. Now, here's where it does. If you've never run a marathon and you don't know if your joints are ready for it, you don't know if your mind is ready for it, and you haven't practiced your nutrition, because that is huge in long races, well then, yeah, you have to put in some longer days simulating what that race is going to be like. If you're going to do a century bicycle ride or race, which is 100 miles, and you've never been in the saddle for more than an hour, well, yes, you are going to have to get used to your fanny getting out there and being on that saddle, because if you don't, you're going to be paying the price. You probably won't finish because you'll have so many blisters and issues back there, or your back pain or whatever. So really what we know is the long day doesn't really do anything further for your fitness. It simply gets your body and mind more ready for it. So if you need that, like if you've never done something long, well then yeah, you need some prep work. But if you've already accomplished those things and know you can cover the distance, that's not the issue. The issue is your fitness as far as doing better. Well then it behooves you to spend more quality time working on specific points of your fitness. So what's the answer? The answer is, for fitness, that long day is kind of madness. For people who like to just go out and zone out, and they just love being out in nature and they absolutely love it, go for it. Nothing wrong with that. If your motive is like, I just really like to run long, and I've got time this morning, it doesn't stress me out, and all that, go for it. But if your motive is, and which is most people's, because they see other people do it, this is going to make me so much better, that is just flat out not true. So my piano teacher put it so well And it is so interesting, the correlation. So I'm learning how to play piano, and I really enjoy it. And she says to me, her name is Natalie, and she's awesome. Love Natalie. And she's also a triathlete, by the way. And she says to me, Rob, if you'll just practice on that piano for 10 minutes a day, you're going to get so much better. And she calls me Coach. Coach, you know that practicing 10 minutes a day is so much better than just sitting down when you feel like it and basically binge playing, right? Kind of taking the example of fitness. And it's like, that's so true. So when you look at the world of physical fitness, frequency, intensity, time, that exercise prescription, what they found was greater frequency leads to greater gains because your body really starts to get into a routine of getting a little bit better every day. So within reason, increasing that frequency, so doing a little bit. Let's say, you've got to do 20 miles of running a week. Well, it makes sense to split that 20 miles up evenly among, say, 7 or 6 days than it does running the 20 miles all in one day and not doing anything for 6 days, right? I mean, of course it does. So if you think of it that way. Now, frequency can become a problem too if you do too much of it. But that's, again, for another day. The reality is this. The long day is overrated. And people that really, really figure it out know that. The problem is nothing is going to exhaust you more. I hear people say sometimes, they're going to get hurt with a lot of intensity. That's not true. I mean, it can be true. But the one that really gets people injured is over-reliance upon that really long day because you end up running with very tired muscles. And tired muscles lead to fatigued joints, which could potentially lead to injury. So the method is be consistent. Frequency is better than anything else. Cutting your workout short before you're overly fatigued is a good idea, and doing that more frequently than destroying yourself in 1 or 2 sessions per week. All right? So that was fun. I enjoyed it. And I want to thank our second sponsor, the Istanbul Turkish Mediterranean Cuisine. They have great salads, great vegetarian options if you're into that, which I am. They can be reached at 488 South Young Street, Ormond Beach, Florida. And their phone is 386-492-7100. And until next time, be Max Fit and be Max Well.